How did someone draw Antarctica without ice? In 1513, before it was even officially discovered. No, this isn't a conspiracy theory. It's documented history, and it's etched onto a piece of gazelle parchment known as the Piri Reis Map, which basically throws in the face of modern science one uncomfortable truth. Someone knew the geography of our planet with absurd precision, centuries before satellites, drones, or Google Earth. Piri Reis, the Ottoman admiral behind the map, claimed he based it on much older sources, including maps from the time of Alexander the Great. So what's on this map? Entire coastlines of South America, and a landmass whose shape perfectly matches Antarctica's coast, without ice. Fun fact, Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, and only in 1958 did we confirm via radar that this was indeed its real coastal shape beneath the ice. Professor Charles Hapgood studied the map thoroughly and concluded it was copied from much older records, likely created by a civilization with mind-blowing cartographic and nautical knowledge. Even Einstein praised Hapgood's work, noting its complexity. But of course, today it's just labeled a historical curiosity. What's really curious is why no one wants to talk about it. Piri Reis wasn't just a cartographer with a nice quill and too much free time. He was an admiral of the Ottoman Navy, basically the CEO of compasses back then. The guy commanded fleets and drew maps with such surgical precision, it's like he had a secret satellite hidden in his turban. In 1513, he crafted a map on gazelle skin, because paper was for peasants, and casually included a coastline that looked suspiciously familiar, Antarctica. But hold up. In 1513, no one even knew Antarctica existed, let alone what it looked like. His explanation? He used ancient maps as references. Fine, but which ones? He claimed they dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, meaning his map was already a Xerox of an ancient Xerox, filled with details modern science only confirmed centuries later with ice-penetrating radar. So here's the million-dollar question. How the hell did they know that? And here's where the academic headache starts. Either the guy made the luckiest guess in human history, or someone way before him knew far more than they should have. But since this sort of thing makes the guardians of official truth twitchy, the map was quietly labeled an Ottoman curiosity. Funny how anything that threatens the official narrative ends up gathering dust in a museum, never on the front page of a textbook. The Piri Reis Map is like that awkward uncle at family dinner who blurts out an uncomfortable truth, then pretends it was just a joke. Because right there, between South America, Africa, and a few lost islands, is a coastline with curves so perfect. It's identical to Antarctica, only without the ice. You might think, okay, coincidence. But what happens when that coincidence lines up with radar data from the 1950s? Now it gets spicy. The Antarctic coastline, buried under 2 kilometers of ice, wasn't even revealed until 1958, during the International Geophysical Year. And yet, a guy in 1513 mapped it out with unsettling geometric accuracy. It's like finding an iPhone 15 in an Egyptian tomb. You could claim it's a trick of the light, but the lock screen with TikTok playing might disagree. The academic explanation is always a poetic shrug, based on older maps. Sure. Which maps? Oh, those vanished, like socks in a cheap motel. And what can't be explained is conveniently ignored, because admitting that someone charted Antarctica before it was even discovered breaks the beautiful linear fairy tale we're all taught in school. And no one wants to see the Tower of Historical Certainty collapse, especially if it was built on ice. Let's recap. In 1513, Piri Reis draws the Antarctic coastline, but the continent wouldn't be discovered for another 300 years. And it's not just there. It's there without ice, exactly like what scientists only confirmed in 1958 using ground-penetrating radar. Does that sound like a lucky guess? Because if it is, it's the kind of luck that wins the lottery and guesses the IRS agent's PIN. Enter Professor Charles Hapgood, no mystic guru or TikTok theorist, just a serious academic. He studied the map and concluded it was based on even older cartographic sources. His book Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, 1966, laid it all out. And guess what? Albert Einstein himself wrote the foreword, praising the research. So if Einstein respected it, why does academia today treat it like historical fan fiction? Simple. It doesn't fit the script. Admitting that ancient civilizations knew the layout of Antarctica without ice would mean rewriting textbooks, opening doors to heretical possibilities, and maybe, just maybe, realizing we're not the first advanced civilization, just the one with better Wi-Fi. And academia's ego? Not quite ready for that existential plot twist. You know that part skeptics love to say? But real scientists never studied this. Well, sit down, because they did. And one of the people who helped put the Piri Reis Map on the map, pun intended, was none other than Albert Einstein. Yes, the EMC2 guy wrote the foreword to Charles Hapgood's book and basically said, "There's stuff here that science hasn't figured out yet." Don't worry, he didn't become a crystal-waving mystic. He was just more curious than arrogant. What's wild is that, in the 1950s, the US Air Force used radar to map Antarctica's subglacial mountains. And surprise, the contours they found matched the 1513 map. Cosmic coincidence or copy-paste from an ancient source? That's where skeptics start choking on their coffee. Because the margin of error was too small for lucky guessing. Piri Reis didn't have Google Earth, but he nailed features only revealed centuries later with military tech. So what happened next? Absolutely nothing. No curriculum changes, no headlines. At best, a interesting, followed by the map being buried in some dusty corner of academia labeled "Do Not Touch." Because when the truth threatens the comfort of consensus, the instinct isn't to investigate, it's to lock the door and pretend the building isn't shaking. The history you learned in school is like a polished PowerPoint. Clean, linear, and allergic to questions. Now picture the Piri Reis Map popping up in the middle of that presentation, like an inappropriate pop-up ad. That's what it does to the official narrative. It breaks the flow, scrambles the timeline, and forces a rewrite without the training wheels. If we accept that Antarctica was mapped before it was discovered, the real question isn't just how, it's who. And that's where things get awkward. Modern science depends on tidy chronology to keep the whole system coherent. Everything needs a start, middle, and end, preferably without ancient high-tech civilizations ruining the storyline. Because if you admit that, who explains the collective blackout in our historical memory? Spoiler, nobody wants to. This map is an inconvenient proof, and inconvenient truths are treated like typos. It's easier to call it a cartographic anomaly than to admit humanity may have known more in the past than it does now. The irony? While NASA sends robots to Mars, a piece of gazelle skin in a Turkish museum might have already spoiled the plot twist of Earth's forgotten history, and no one wants to press play. If it were just Piri Reis, maybe we could write it off as an Ottoman fever dream seasoned with too many spices. But nope, he's not alone. The Orontius Phineas map from 1531 also shows Antarctica without ice, complete with rivers and mountain ranges. Then there's the famous Gerardus Mercator map, placing polar lands with disturbing precision. And guess what? All of them were based on, older sources. Always the ghostly, older sources. Mysterious, untraceable, and more persistent than a nosy landlord. It's like there was an invisible library passed hand to hand, and nobody today wants to admit they've peeked inside. Oddly enough, these maps circulated among scholars and navigators who had no physical access to Antarctica. So what were they copying from? Maybe from something created long before the ice took over. But instead of asking who knew, the answer became, probably just a cartographic error. In doubt, history teachers looked the other way, or rather, turned their eyes into closed books. So we go on ignoring the very real possibility that ancient civilizations had mapped the Earth in shocking detail. No satellites, no internet, and definitely no university grants. Maybe they had something even rarer, curiosity without credentials. When multiple ancient maps all accidentally show the same thing, maybe the mistake isn't in the maps, maybe it's in us, assuming we're the first smart ones on the planet. And that's where the juicy theories come in. lost pre-Ice Age civilizations like Atlantis, or perhaps the remnants of a forgotten library of knowledge, passed secretly from generation to generation before being swallowed by time or by someone's agenda. Some believe this knowledge came from antediluvian cultures, societies that thrived before the last ice age and left behind breadcrumbs for modern-day Indiana Jones types to find. Others think the Library of Alexandria didn't burn entirely by accident. Parts of it were hidden, smuggled, or preserved. And maybe, just maybe, parts of its contents live on in these mistaken maps that no one wants to take seriously. Of course, the textbook-friendly explanation remains: misinterpretation. Because accepting that someone mapped Antarctica without ice means cracking open the attic of human history. And no one wants to clean that mess up after 300 years of proudly decorating it. Better to call it a coincidence than face the fact that we might just be the amnesiac descendants of a civilization far smarter than we are. At some point, you have to stop calling it coincidence. When ancient maps show things only confirmed centuries later, like Antarctica without ice, you either question history or let it swallow you whole, textbook style. The real question isn't, is this true? But, why didn't anyone tell you? And the silence around that answer screams louder than any conspiracy theory. Maybe the scariest part isn't what's on the maps, but what's missing between them. The censored versions, the documents that disappeared, the scrolls tucked away in locked archives. The truth might be out there, but apparently it didn't pass the academic entrance exam. Because accepting that a civilization before ours knew geography, engineering, and the stars, that's admitting we're not the first, just the most confident forgetters. So now it's up to you. Keep digesting the version of history served with a side of amnesia, or start mapping your own path, even if it means skating on the thin ice of inconvenient truth. So, if a map from 1513 shows Antarctica without ice, and no one talks about it, what else is buried under layers of time or ice? And why do these stories only surface when you start digging outside the glossy surface of official history? Maybe the most uncomfortable question isn't who knew, but why did we forget? Or worse, why did we choose to forget? Because in the end, the biggest mystery isn't in the ancient maps. It's in our modern obsession with thinking truth only exists after Wi-Fi. What do you think? Are these maps proof of something bigger or just well-drawn accidents? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share this with someone who still thinks history started with the French Revolution.